Hello friends and welcome or welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Kat, and if you're watching this on the day this video goes live, then this marks the second anniversary of my channel. So for the occasion, I wanted to do something fun, and so I have a book haul for you, but with a twist. So today I want to go through the books that I've acquired since my last book haul, which was around mid-2025. And since then I've acquired and read already some of those books and decided not to keep all of them on my shelf. So I won't talk about them today, but I will put them on the screen here. And that leaves us with 17 books that I want to talk to you about today. Most of them I got for Christmas, and because again it's my channel's second anniversary, I wanted to do something a little bit fun, a little bit special. So I will try to pair each book with a fun fact about me or a life lesson, or just like share something a little bit more personal so that you also get to know me a little bit better. The first book is The Emperor's Assassin by Shelby Oval. This is a high fantasy novel inspired by the Ottoman Empire, in which we follow Fallon, who is promised to the emperor as a concubine, but she actually has ulterior motives. She wants to kill the emperor, and she also has a secret that she has powerful water magic. This is actually a self-published book by one of my good friends from one of my writing groups. Shelby very kindly signed the book for me as well. And this is a book that I partly read as a beta reader, so it was quite fun, but I haven't read the final product yet, so I'm very excited. The next book is Mangeuse by Lorraine Malka. This is a French non-fiction about the history of eating from the perspective of women, and I guess a lot of politics around women gluttony and all the social pressures around how women eat. I got this one because I sold quite a few books secondhand when I did a big unhaul on my shelves, and so I got some money to spend in my local bookshop, so that's the book I chose to purchase with that money. And a fun fact about me kind of related to this book or the world of food: I do quite enjoy baking, and so one of my star recipe is a pear almond pie, which I think has already been featured on this channel. So I'm not cooking very regularly, not something I struggle a little bit with, but baking I do really enjoy. The next book I got is Happy Hour by Mario Granados. This is a literary fiction. The blurb kind of compares it to Macbeth, which I haven't read but really want to as well. And it's this story of two best friends who arrive in New York in their 20s and they just want to have fun. So it's kind of their daily life, going from odd jobs, babysitter gigs and things like that, trying to make ends meet at the same time as in the evening going out and partying and trying to infuse a bit more glamour into their lives. It sounds quite intriguing, and a fun fact about me, maybe some cool jobs that I've done or odd jobs that I did in my early 20s. I think the first ever job I got was working in a library. So I was studying languages at the time, and so I worked for a few months in the university library, which was all about rare languages. And I was so inexperienced that when they actually called me after I applied for the job, I showed up for a meeting, and that was actually an interview, but I hadn't realized it. I thought I already had the job and it was just a fun chat to get to know them. So as a result, I was very relaxed and very happy, and so that's probably what meant I got the job in the end, thankfully. Next, it is Melmoth by Sarah Perry. And I don't know much about this book. It seems to be spanning quite a few countries. It talks about Czechoslovakia, Turkey. The thing that got me to purchase this book is that it starts one winter night in Prague, and so I bought this while I was traveling in Prague. I thought that would be a nice souvenir to get it. Fun fact that I could relate to this book is that I went to Prague with one of my best friends, and we've been doing a kind of girls' weekend every year for a few years since I moved away from Sweden, and it's been such a big source of joy for me to have this trip and this time to reconnect with her, because now we're both living in different countries, so it's been a bit hard. So it's been wonderful to have that time with her every year. Then we have Intimacies by Katie Kitamura. And this is also a literary fiction book that I got during my trip in Prague. And it's the story of an interpreter who gets somehow entangled in with a crime. Like, one of her friends witnessed an act of violence, and somehow this interpreter becomes obsessed with this crime, and she befriends, I think, the victim or someone close to the victim. I've always been fascinated with the art of interpretation. I think it's a really hard, really intense job. I've never got to practice it, but I worked as a translator for a few years back, working from English into French and also occasionally from Swedish into French. So I'm always really excited about the story that features translators or interpreters. Next is Perfection by Vincenzo Latronico, and this is translated from the Italian by Sophie Hughes. This is a very short book. This is also a literary fiction about a millennial couple living in Berlin and kind of encompassing, I think, the cliches about millennials. So the blurb talked about them as this expat couple living the dream in Berlin in a bright, affordable, plan-filled apartment. Their life revolves around slow cooking, Danish furniture, sexual experimentation, and the city's 24-hour party scene. I've heard incredible things about this book from Caitlin, a Korean to English translator that I follow on YouTube. I love her channel, and so this recommendation from her really caught my eye, and I was quite curious to read it. As I mentioned, I used to live in Sweden, and while I was there, I moved quite a bit. I think in the almost 4 years that I lived in Sweden, I had probably 5 or 6 different apartments. Several of those were in Södermalm, which is a part of Stockholm that's kind of very much the hipster part of the city, and I think I was very much living this kind of typical hipster millennial lifestyle. It was probably a living cliche, but it was a really nice time in my life, I won't lie. Next we have The Children of Gods and Fighting Men by Shona Lawless. This is a fantasy book that I've heard about on Jessica's Library Card channel, and she talked about it with such enthusiasm that I got really curious and asked for it for Christmas. This is historical fantasy set in 981 AD, and the Viking king of Dublin is dead, and his widow has ambitions, but she also has secret powers. So I don't know much about the plot. I kind of want to go into this a bit blind. I'm not really used to historical fantasy, but I'm curious to dive in and give it a try. I used to love fantasy when I was a kid. I was obsessed with a young wizard that we all know about, and I also loved his Dark Material series, those kind of books. But then for many years after that, I somehow stopped reading fantasy. I think it was maybe because part of my studies were quite focused on literary studies, and it was very much all the kind of French classics. And then I did a master's in creative writing, and they were reading kind of literary French contemporary fiction. So in the midst of all that, I stopped reading fantasy, and I kind of somehow forgot that I loved fantasy, which was really sad. But thankfully, I think it was just before COVID, so probably, and after I came back from Sweden. So somehow in 2019, probably 2020, I picked up the Mirror Visitor by Christelle Debos, which is a fantasy series, a French fantasy series, which got super popular, which is quite rare, and loved it so much. I binged it so quickly. And after that, I picked up Margaret Rogerson's books as well and really enjoyed them, and that's how I came back to my love of fantasy, and now it's one of the primary genres that I read, and so I'm quite keen to dive into a new subgenre of it this year with this book. Next we have Stillborn by Guadalupe Nettel, and this is translated from the Spanish by Rosalind Harvey. This is another recommendation from Kate Lee, and this is the story of two women, one of whom doesn't want children. She considers getting sterilized, and her friend actually does want children, but when her pregnancy comes with complications, then the two women have to kind of reconcile the complexity of their emotions. This sounds so interesting, so fascinating. Again, I heard amazing things from Kate about this book, so I'm really looking forward to diving in. And this especially speaks to me because I'm very much on the camp of one of the two characters, whereas I don't want children. I am child-free and always wanted to be. So I find myself quite lucky in that regard, that since I was a kid, I knew I didn't want children. There is this anecdote in my family that when I was like a tiny kid, I came up to my mum and kind of said that I didn't want children because it was too much responsibility. And I was way too young to be making that kind of statement, but I've always known, and it's always been uncertainty, and I kind of feel a lot for people who are uncertain, because this is such a big decision, and so feeling unsure must be really difficult, and so I feel for all those people. I am so glad that I've been sure of myself for many years, even though it has come with a lot of judgment sometimes for other people and not so kind words. But at least, again, I've been sure of myself, and I haven't changed my mind despite all the many people who told me I would. So that's where we're at. The Will of the Many by James Islington is a quite interesting and intriguing fantasy novel. It's sometimes pitched as like a fantasy MLM scheme. I think in this world you can lend your will to someone above you, like in the government, like in the different levels of hierarchy. And I think it's inspired from the Roman Empire. James Islington being Australian, that leads me to tell you that I used to live in Australia. It was only for a few months. It was with a working holiday visa when I was in my early 20s. And when I came back, my English was much better, but also some people told me that I had a hint of Australian accent. I think I've clearly lost it since then, but that was quite fun. And I think the best memory I have from Australia was when I was a volunteer at the Dolphin Discovery Centre in Bunbury, which is like 2.5 hours south of Perth. And there you have wild dolphins coming into the bay, and so the volunteers at the center make sure that the interactions between the wild dolphins and the visitors, everything happens safely, both for us humans but also for the dolphins. So it was just a dream come true. I also got really lucky that I managed to, during my time there, become an assistant for a PhD student who was doing her research on the local population of dolphins. So on top of being a volunteer at the center, I was also going with her on the research boat and looking out for dolphins all day. As a kid, I wanted to be a marine biologist and to study marine mammals. I didn't end up going that route for many reasons, but I felt like my childhood dream came true during my time there, and so I'm so grateful I got to experience it, even only for a short while. Alchemized by Stanley Yu. You've probably heard about it. It's originally a fan fiction of a romance between Draco and Hermione from the Harry Potter universe, crossed off with the Handmaid's Tale. And that's pretty much all I know. I know it's been a huge success to the point that it's been traditionally published and became an instant bestseller. I don't normally read dark romance, and this is a beast. So I'm honestly a bit nervous about it, but also quite curious to know what all the hype is about. And again, this is a beautiful edition. The spine is so soft because the paper is really thin. So I'm curious to dive in. And also look at this. Isn't she beautiful? The Tusks of Extinction by Ray Naylor. This is a short science fiction novella in which mammoths have been brought back to life. And so this scientist, who is a specialist in elephant behavior, needs to come in and help the mammoth understand how they're supposed to behave. I'm really curious about this one. Also, again, very short. I've read The Mountain Under the Sea by this author in 2025 and really loved it. So I'm curious to read more of their books. And in terms of fun fact, elephants have a very special place in my heart because they were my father's favorite animal. So I've gifted him many different types of elephants over the year, like little figurines and statues and even a stone carved statue of Ganesha, the elephant god, from a trip I did in India. So yeah, I do love elephants. Several short sentences about writing by Verlene Klinkenborg. And this is a book that I got on my radar from the Christiane Jones channel. She talked about this and shared a quote from this book that was really lovely. It's obviously a book about writing, and I'm currently reading this. I'm not far, I'm just like about 30 pages in. Christie's channel is one of my favorites. She's one of the YouTubers that I've been following for years. So it's been lovely to see her journey as a writer. And I'm also a writer. I mean, if you've been following my channel for a while, you might have seen some of my writing content. And yeah, I've published mainly in French. I've published 2 non-fiction books in French. One is a typical travel guide about Stockholm, kind of featuring different people living in the city with different kind of backgrounds and talking about why they live in the city, what they like and what they don't like about it. And the other one is a guide about plant-based cooking. Other than that, I've also contributed to quite a few books and magazines as either a writer, a proofreader, a translator, or an editor. But almost all of it is in French, so I don't think it would be accessible to most of you on this channel, unfortunately. Next we have Goddess of the River by Vaishnavi Patel. This is a Indian mythology inspired fantasy about the river goddess Durga. And I'm really curious to read it. I've read Kaikeyi by this author and quite enjoyed it, so I'm curious to read this one as well. I'm especially excited about South Indian fantasy because I used to study Hindi. I actually have a bachelor in Hindi, even though it was many years ago and my Hindi is very rusty. I haven't practiced it in many years. But I do love the kind of cultural scene in India. I love Indo-English literature. I did practice an Indian classical dance for many years as well, called Odissi. So yeah, this is especially close to my heart and I'm really curious to read it. H is for Hawk by Ellen MacDonald. This is a memoir about grief. Helen lost her dad, and so in that time of grief, she came back to one of her childhood's passion and love, which is falconry. And so she got herself a hawk and started taming her. I've heard about this book a lot for quite a while. It's not new. When was it published? It was first published in 2014, so it's been a while. The reason I've wanted to read it now is because I lost my dad a year ago at the beginning of 2025, and so I've been feeling like reading about someone going through a similar experience, and I love animals, so I think reading about grief through that lens and through a relationship with such a cool animal as a hawk would be really interesting and hopefully quite healing as well. Next we have The Cartographers by Peng Shepherd, and this is the story of a woman who has been in conflict with her dad. I think she hasn't spoken to him in a few years, but when he is found dead, she is forced to investigate about one of the maps that his father was kind of studying, and this map was a mass-produced highway map that somehow someone is kind of destroying all the copies of that map. And so she kind of embarks on a journey to figure out the secret embedded in that map and kind of what true power might lie within it. Well, I hadn't clocked that it's also about a dead father, so my subconscious is clearly at play here, but mainly I wanted to read this because I do love maps. I think it's, I don't know, such a cool, interesting medium, and so I've been slowly kind of gathering books about maps. I have a really cool Japanese book about maps. This is Map Mania with like a bunch of different types of maps, and I don't know, this just tickles my brain in all the right ways. I find it fascinating. I think this comes from my studies after my A-levels. Like I did 2 years of French preparatory school and I hated most of it. But on my second year, I had a geography teacher who was amazing and made me fall in love with geography when in high school. And all of my years in school before that, I just hated geography. It sounded so boring. And we had a theme of that year, which was about, what was it? I think it was something around cities and slums and kind of like urban geography, and she made it so interesting. And yeah, I ended up loving that class and having good grades in that class, which was really hard in preparatory school. And I had like basically those years of study like prepare you for the exams of some like really fancy schools in France, which I was not interested in, but I still had to go to the exam. And so I had to memorize some maps so I was able to recreate them like in my essays during the exam. That was just like kind of madness. But I think my love for maps comes from that time, because suddenly I saw like how the kind, like different kinds of information you can share with maps, how you can shape it, and yeah, I don't know, I just found it fascinating. I'm very bad at talking about it, but it's again a medium that I find really cool, and I just love maps, so I'm really excited to read a novel about maps. All right, and the final book on this book haul is actually the first book I purchased in 2026, and that is Lady Macbeth by Ava Reid. To be honest, the main reason I got this book is for the cover. I think it's just absolutely stunning, and I tried to avoid to buy books just for that cover, but I'm really obsessed with this one. I even tried to find prints of it instead of buying the book, but I couldn't. So I'm almost a bit disappointed that it's so small. Like I wish it was bigger, because I think, I don't know, there is something really gripping about her eyes or eye. So yeah, this is a retelling, I think, of Macbeth from the perspective of Lady Macbeth. Because I'm French and I mainly studied kind of the French classics, so more like Racine, Corneille, Molière, I don't have a solid foundation about Shakespeare. Like I've read several of his plays, but I don't feel I have kind of the knowledge and the obsession for Shakespeare that a lot of English people seem to have. I feel a bit maybe not out of my depths, if maybe not the word, but I'm feeling a bit intimidated to go into this book and feeling like I don't really have enough context. And so I actually ordered from my library a few books. I want to read Macbeth, the play, but I think the Old English might be a bit challenging for me, so I got one edition, that like a bilingual edition, so I can see the English text but have a translation, and I turned this into a whole thing basically. So I ordered like 2 different French translations. I'm quite curious, and then kind of a text from one of the translator about Shakespeare. So I want to do a bit of reading and get a bit more context before I dive into this book, so that I can hopefully really get the most out of it and really appreciate it. Because one of the main lessons that I took from 2025 was that, for example, when I go to the museum, I enjoy it 10 times more when I do a little bit of preparation and I have some sense of what I'm looking at. I, for the longest time, felt like I was not really an art person, like a visual art, like a painting kind of person, like a museum person, because I didn't really have an kind of art history or art education. And so I would go into the Louvre or those kind of museum and just like, yes, I can find one painting beautiful, but I don't have any, again, like context or reference. And so I felt very lost. And so it was hard for me to really appreciate it. But this year I went to the Musée d'Orsay in Paris for the first time. And there was an exhibition from Saint-Sergent, who's like a very famous American painter, but he spent a good chunk of his life in Europe. And so I had seen pictures of some of his paintings before the exhibition, and so I did a little bit of research, watched some videos about him and about some of his paintings, and that made my experience so much better. I had such a fun time and really enjoyed the exhibition much more. And so that's kind of a lesson I'm taking with me and kind of applying to this book, because again, like it clearly has literary work coming before it, and so I think having at least a minimum understanding of kind of Macbeth, like the work from Shakespeare, would help me kind of better understand maybe what Ava Reid was trying to do with this book and enhance my enjoyment. So yeah, it's been fun kind of preparing for this, and just like I'm starting to gather the materials now, especially at this moment where personal curriculum are all the rage and people are getting excited about getting like assigning their own homework to themselves. It's kind of funny to me because it's something I've been thinking about quite a bit, and maybe in a bit broader term of just like what it means to lead an intellectual life and how to do that. And so I've been starting to create that guide for myself and what that means to me and what would be the best way to go about it, all of that. Maybe I'll make a video about it one day, but it would be a huge amount of work, so don't expect it anytime soon. But yeah, it's been really fun to see that trend kind of blowing up on the internet, and seeing people excited about learning again, which I think is really cool. So that's kind of a mini personal curriculum that I'm doing around Macbeth for myself this year. Those were all the books that I recently acquired. I hope you had a fun time going through those books and learning a bit more about me at the same time. And yeah, if you've been following my channel for a while, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate having you here. Honestly, like the friendships that I've sparked thanks to this channel, and the conversation, the comments, the community is really the reason why I make videos. I think it's really the thing that makes YouTube really, really fun and really cool. And our little corner of the internet is so lovely and so warm and so friendly that yeah, you're the reason why this has been such an enjoyable journey. And so yeah, a big thanks to you. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye. What could I say about this book? I'm especially excited about I can't speak today.